My name is Ariana. I'm 36 years old and I'm the CEO of a biotech company in Boston. I used to believe that after all those years of carrying the family's financial burdens, the least they would do was show a little gratitude. But on the night I drove back to Vermont for a family dinner, in the very house I'd been paying the mortgage on for 12 years, my mother looked me straight in the eye and said, "We already sold it, Ariana. The transfer's been finalized." They sold the house I was still paying off, without asking, without warning, and sat there as if I should thank them for letting me know. Have you ever been betrayed by your own family so cruelly that you no longer recognized who they were? If this story stirs something inside you, feel free to leave a comment below. Hit like if you believe kindness should never be exploited. And don't forget to subscribe, because what they did that night was only the beginning. Let me tell you what happened after those words. We already sold it. I remember clearly the first time Derek got expelled from college. He was in his sophomore year in California studying aerospace engineering, a major our parents proudly boasted about to the relatives. The call came in late in the afternoon. I had just stepped out of a long, exhausting boardroom meeting. On the other end was my mother's voice, shaky, nearly in tears. "Ariana, the school said Derek has to vacate the dorm by the end of the week. He's been suspended. They said you need to call to find out more." I immediately called Derek. After nearly 40 minutes of him stumbling through excuses, I realized he hadn't gone to class a single time that semester. The nearly $20,000 in tuition I had paid that term? Gone. Just like that. But I didn't yell. I didn't blame him. I just asked, "So what are you planning to do now?" Derek went silent. Finally I said, "Pack your things. I'll fly over and bring you home." From that point on, I became the reluctant sponsor of a string of failures Derek himself never denied. He changed majors 4 times over the next 3 years, from engineering to psychology, then to business, and finally to graphic design. Every switch meant more tuition, more books, more rent. And more than once, I quietly paid overdue bills that my mother sent with a short note. "Ariana, I'm sorry. Just help us this one last time." That one last time lasted 11 years. My mother used to be healthy and energetic, managing a small dental clinic in town. But when I was 27, she suddenly had a heart attack while cooking dinner. I remember every minute of that night. The panicked call from my father, the ambulance siren, the beeping of the heart monitor counting down like a quiet metronome. After the surgery, the doctor told us without good insurance the recovery would be expensive. She stayed in the hospital for nearly 12 days. Insurance covered some, but the rest was over $36,000. My father said nothing. He just looked at me with tired eyes. I pulled out my card and paid the full amount. I didn't regret it. I didn't hesitate. She was my mother. I thought I was just doing what any daughter should do. I never told anyone that my personal account dropped below 3 digits after I paid that hospital bill. I still showed up at work, smiled in meetings, answered client emails. No one knew that at night I lay on my living room floor calculating how to survive the next month. After that, I began sending money monthly because mom couldn't work for over a year. $1,200 each month. Sometimes $1,500 if things came up. They never asked if I could afford it. They'd just send photos of the house renovations. The new stove, refinished floors, upgraded plumbing. The house in Vermont that I once saw as a home slowly became an endless maintenance project. I still remember that winter when the heating system broke. Mom called early in the morning, her voice shivering. "It's freezing, Ariana. Snow's falling. Your dad tried to fix it but couldn't. Can you?" I cut her off gently. "Send me the quote. I'll handle it." The repair cost? Nearly $7,000. I said nothing. I never said anything. My friends called me the Iron Woman. The girl who always had a plan. The one who was never late, never lost her cool. But they didn't know what it took for me to stay calm. How many things I sacrificed. The little ones, like a summer trip to Italy or the camera I always wanted. And the bigger ones, like the personal investment fund I dreamed would help me retire early. Everything went to my family. I became a bottomless wallet. I'm not sharing this to complain or demand sympathy. I'm telling it because, at the time, I truly believed I was doing the right thing. I thought if I helped them enough, they would eventually get back on their feet. I thought they'd look at me and say, "Thank you. We survived because of you." But those words never came. They used to call me the numbers girl. They laughed when I talked about budgeting, expense tracking, or emergency savings. Melissa once scoffed when I declined a group trip because I wanted to save for future investments. "You live such a boring life," she said, then downed a $24 cocktail I paid for. Derek would often pat my shoulder, half joking, half serious. "You're like the Federal Reserve of the family." I just smile. I never once mentioned the $200,000 I had poured into the Vermont house since it began falling apart. I thought if I didn't help, who would? My parents weren't bad people. At least I used to believe that. They were just used to me being there. Used to me handling every crisis. Used to me answering calls in the middle of the night, paying the bill, and never bringing it up again. They were so used to it they no longer saw it as something to be thankful for. It became routine. Like turning on a light switch and expecting the bulb to shine. No one thanks the switch. And I didn't expect thanks. I just believed that if I gave enough, they'd never leave me behind. I was wrong. And I didn't realize it until the night they sat across from me eating stew Mom had made and said, "We already sold the house, Ariana." I stared at Mom stunned. Not because she said they sold it, but because of how she said it, so casually, like they'd just bought a new washing machine. My father sat straight, hands clasped on the table, silent as if attending a board meeting. Derek was glued to his phone. Melissa looked up, her eyes filled with smug satisfaction. I swallowed hard, keeping my voice calm even though a storm was spinning inside my chest. "Who did you sell it to?" I asked, each word deliberate. And why was I the last to know? My dad cleared his throat, still not looking at me. "An investor in Burlington. He offered a really good price." I turned and looked directly at Melissa. She glanced at Dad, then back at me, smirking. "His name's Brad. He's my ex. He's into real estate now." I just made the connection for the family. The room felt like it had lost all air. "Brad. I met him 3 years ago when Melissa brought him home for the holidays. Handsome, talkative, but his eyes scanned people like furniture, measuring their worth. I never liked him. But I never imagined." I let out a bitter laugh. It scraped the quiet kitchen like a blade. "So the whole family agreed to sell this house, the one I've been paying the mortgage on for over a decade, to my sister's ex-boyfriend. And no one thought I deserved even a heads up." "You're overreacting," Mom chimed in, her voice soft like she was consoling a child. "Brad's a good guy. He said he'd renovate, keep the structure intact. And you don't need this house. You already have everything, Ariana." I turned to her. "When you say I have everything, what do you mean?" Mom pressed her lips together. "I mean, you have a career, a home in Boston, financial stability. Melissa's starting an art project, you know that, she needs capital. Derek is working on opening a bar, he finally has a goal after all these years. But you're fine." Melissa folded her hands on the table, pretending to sound gentle. "I told Mom you'd understand. Really. I know you're practical. And you're not even emotionally attached to the house anymore. You were just paying the mortgage. Just paying the mortgage." Those words echoed in my mind like a dull but relentless blade. I once believed I was keeping that house alive for the whole family. I saw it as an anchor, a place to come home to when the world outside got too much. But to them, I was just the one who wrote the checks. "Where's the money?" I asked, my voice steady now. "The money from the house sale. Over $800,000. You said the offer was great, right?" Derek scoffed. "Part of it went to me and Melissa as startup capital. I've got a bar project, negotiating a lease downtown. Melissa's investing in an art space. The rest, Mom and Dad are keeping for retirement. It's not like anyone's wasting it." I looked at each of them. Not a flicker of guilt on their faces. As if I was the unreasonable one for even asking. I took a deep breath, willing my hands not to shake under the table. I wasn't asked. I wasn't informed. But I'm the one who kept that house from foreclosure. And now you split the money without even putting me in the picture. My dad spoke. "Because you don't need it, Ariana. Look at you. You've got your own car, your own home, a retirement account. Your siblings, they're just getting started. They need a little help." I let out a quiet laugh. "A little help using the money I've poured in for over a decade?" Melissa crossed her arms, tilting her head. "You're acting like something was stolen from you. But the house was under our parents' names. They had every right to sell. No one forced you to pay for 12 years. That was your choice." That line hit like a punch to the gut. No one forced you. I turned to my mother. So those late-night phone calls, the ones with you crying about broken pipes, Derek getting kicked out of school, Melissa needing supplies for an art fair, those were all just me volunteering? She turned her face away without answering. I nodded slowly, the ground beneath me feeling like it was crumbling. They didn't see anything wrong. They genuinely believed I would understand, accept, maybe even keep helping because I was Ariana, the one who had everything. And they were just the ones who didn't. But did any of them ever stop to ask what it cost to have everything? I sat there at the dinner table, not touching a thing, not meeting anyone's eyes. My mind kept calculating, ticking off numbers like a machine. $1,200 a month for 12 years. $7,000 for the heating system. $36,000 for mom's hospital stay. Nearly $80,000 for Derek's tuition, not counting extras. Altogether, nearly $400,000. Gone from my account year after year. And now they sat there, calmly saying I didn't need to know the house had been sold, the money divided, and I wasn't part of it. I picked up my glass of water, trying to stay composed. My voice was even, cold but not sharp. Well then, I said, since it's all been divided, I want to know, do any of you plan to reimburse me for what I contributed? Or at the very least, return what I paid to save this house from foreclosure? The air froze. Derek stopped texting. Melissa glanced at Mom and clicked her tongue like she disapproved. My mother propped her elbows on the table, her eyes wide. Ariana, she said in a tone almost like a teacher's, do you really not get it? Family isn't measured in dollars. Emotions matter more than money. You're smart enough to know that. I tilted my head, a chill running down my spine. So you think I'm just being demanding? That's not what I'm saying, she replied, but her eyes didn't leave the tablecloth. It's just, the way you talk, the way you keep track of every number. It sounds so distant. Like you're not really part of us. I set the glass down. The soft clink of it touching the table sounded louder than it should have. It's not that I keep track, I said quietly. It's that I can't forget. I can't forget the midnight calls where you asked for a few $100s more. I can't forget Derek's sudden tuition emergencies followed by months of silence. I can't forget how all of you kept living comfortably while I pushed back vacations, even sleep, just to make it work. My mother looked up, eyes glossy. Money isn't everything, sweetheart. Family love is what really matters. You're letting material things blind your heart. Before I could respond, my father cut in. We should have a proper discussion. In a more respectful setting. 3 days later, they invited me to a local restaurant owned by a family friend. A private room was reserved. Long table, warm yellow lights, a false sense of calm before the storm. I walked in and saw it wasn't just my parents, Derek and Melissa. Aunt Claire, Uncle Ron, my cousins Emily and Tom, even my paternal grandparents were there. A full-blown family meeting. I stepped in slowly, scanning the room. Everyone sat upright, expressions stiff like they were preparing for a courtroom trial. Melissa spoke first. She cleared her throat and gave me a watery-eyed look. I just want to say, I'm really sad that Ariana feels left out. But she always makes everyone feel small. She always brings up money, talks about what she's done for the family. I feel like I'm just a burden in her eyes. I opened my mouth, but Grandma raised her hand. Ariana, sweetheart, is this really about not getting a share of the sale? They're still young. They need to build their lives. You're already settled. My throat went dry. I hadn't expected this. A full family summit just to shame me for asking about my share. Uncle Ron chimed in, his voice gentle but pointed. You've always been the most successful, Ariana. Everyone admires you. But sometimes we all need to stay humble. Not everything needs to be claimed. Aunt Claire added, no one's saying you're wrong. But the way you handled it, it hurt people. You called your own mother to talk about repayment. You blamed your siblings for needing help. Did you consider how that made them feel? I didn't know how to react, anger or laughter. They were telling me that years of silent support meant nothing. That when I finally said, what about me? I became selfish. Derek muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear, you've always thought you were better than us just because you have money. That one cut deeper than all the others. I turned to look at my brother, the one I'd driven over 8 hours to pick up after his 3rd college suspension. The one I stayed up helping rewrite his resume, covered his car repairs so he could keep a job. And now he stared at me like I was the enemy. I never thought I was better, I said slowly, my voice hoarse. I just thought if I could help then I should. And I thought if one day I got tired someone in this family might say, "How can I help you?" But I was wrong. My mother tapped the table lightly, her voice raised. "Ariana, don't act like a victim. This family loves you. But you've become distant, cold. You look at everything like a spreadsheet, not from the heart." I took a deep breath. The wind outside hissed through the window cracks, sharp and cold. I looked around the room, every face turned away when I met their eyes. Not a single person stood up for me. No sympathy. Just resentment, like I'd betrayed them for daring to speak up. I understood then. This wasn't family anymore. This was a tribunal. And I was being judged for asking for fairness. For daring to say, "I need to be cared for too." I left that family meeting without a word. No yelling. No drama. No promises to come back. I stood up, grabbed my coat, nodded politely to the server, and walked out of that room full of familiar faces colder than strangers. On the drive back to Boston, I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. Just let the sound of the wind through the cracked window and the tires on the damp road fill the silence. Each mile felt like it peeled away another layer of delusion I'd clung to for over a decade. By the time I got to my apartment close to 2 a.m., I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the kitchen floor, leaning against the fridge, eyes fixed on the ceiling. And suddenly, everything was clear. I had stayed silent for far too long. The next day, I opened my laptop and logged into all linked accounts. I started with the bank. One account was under my mother's name, but it was tied directly to my main account, something I had set up back when she had her heart surgery. I closed it and transferred the remaining balance back to my personal card. Next was the secondary credit card I'd given her back in 2015, for emergencies. I used to believe she'd only use it for medication, bills, necessities. But I couldn't forget the last month's statement. A spa visit in Montpelier, $350. Dinner at the Copper Hen, $187. A pair of Stuart Weitzman heels, $620. I called the bank and requested immediate cancellation. When the rep asked for a reason, I simply said, "The user is no longer authorized." Then I hung up without blinking. Then came the utility bills: electricity, water, gas, and internet for the house in Vermont. I had been paying them on autopilot for nearly 12 years. I canceled every single recurring payment, revoked all access. Before logging out, I took a screenshot of the final transaction like a ritual marking the end. And I waited. In less than 36 hours, my phone started vibrating nonstop. The first message was from Mom at 7:30 a.m. "Ariana, the power's out. What's going on?" Before I could reply, another message popped up from Derek. "Did you cancel the gas? I've got a client meeting this morning. No hot water, can't even shower." Then another one from Mom. "What are you doing?" Derek's gas card was declined. He missed his meeting. I didn't respond. I flipped my phone over on the kitchen table, poured myself a glass of water, and sat there watching the morning light stream through the blinds, forming soft streaks across the hardwood floor. I wasn't angry, just startlingly clear-headed. That afternoon, I met with Emma, my close friend and a financial attorney, at a cafe near my office. I told her everything while she listened silently, occasionally nodding or furrowing her brow at the numbers. When I finished, she took a slow sip of her coffee and spoke in a quiet, measured tone. "Ari, did you ever sign any power of attorney document relating to the Vermont house?" I shook my head. I paid the mortgage, but the house was under my parents' name. They asked me to help keep finances steady. That was it. Emma tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "I don't think they could have sold the house that quickly without some kind of financial power of attorney. You were a co-payer, which gives you standing if there wasn't a formal agreement with the joint contributor." I frowned. "I've never signed anything." She set her cup down. "Give me 48 hours. I'll dig into the title transfer records." 2 days later, right at 8 p.m., Emma called back. Her voice didn't carry the usual calm. "There's a financial power of attorney document signed by Ariana Grace Miller, dated April 3rd last year. Notarized at the Bar Town office." I froze. On April 3rd, I was at an annual conference in New York. There were cameras, a full agenda, emails, even photos of me with clients at the evening reception. "That signature," I asked softly, "is it mine?" She paused. "I'm sending you the scan." You tell me. When the photo appeared on my phone screen, I saw how poorly it was forged, stiff, awkward, with crooked loops like someone unfamiliar with writing, Ariana Grace Miller. I placed my finger on the screen, tracing the signature, a slow anger rising in my chest. Who did this? I thought through everyone in the family. Who could fake my signature? Who had access to that notary office? Then I remembered, Dad's old friend Clay used to work at the bar town office. He'd retired about 3 months ago. I called Emma again, voice steady though my eyes had gone sharp. I need the original copy. Impossible. I want to know who brought the papers in. Will do. But Ari. I cut her off. I know. But I can't sit still anymore. I sat in my apartment, staring at the photo of the forged document on my laptop. The overhead light cast a yellow glow across the cold black ink, a truth I hadn't been ready to see. I used to believe that no matter how selfish my family was, they'd never cross a legal line. But now I held proof that someone had faked my signature to legitimize selling the home I'd paid for over a decade. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a direct blow to the very principles I thought we still shared: transparency, honesty, and respect. I emailed Emma, attaching screenshots of every transaction, and asked her to help confirm the notary's identity. Less than a day later, she called back, her voice more somber than ever. It was Clay, Emma said, skipping any preamble. Clay Thompson, the retired notary from Bar, signed off on it. He's now living in Middlebury. Clay, my father's best friend for decades. I remembered him clearly, sitting on our back porch with a beer on the 4th of July. Deep voice, big laugh, always calling me the math genius kid. I once thought he was one of the few adults in our circle I could trust. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long exhale. The disappointment didn't cut like it had before. It had dulled to something quieter, deeper. But I wasn't going to break. Not now. I decided not to confront them yet. No calls. No texts. No dramatic accusations. I needed them to think I was still clueless. Only then would they keep slipping, keep leaving traces. I began gathering evidence, piece by piece. I enabled autocall recording on my phone, saving every single conversation. When Mom called asking why the gas was still off, I pretended I hadn't discovered the house sale yet. I thought things were settled. No one said anything, so I assumed everything was fine. She deflected. Well, it's manageable. Melissa still needs some extra funds for her studio. I saved that clip. 2 weeks later, I found a reason to visit Vermont, telling Mom I needed to pick up a few old belongings before Brad started renovations. Dad called me back, his voice sounding a bit unsure. Now's not the best time. The house is mid-transfer. I asked if I could review the sale documents. He hesitated. Brad's handling all that. You don't need to worry. I recorded the entire call. Then came Melissa. One night, she unexpectedly FaceTimed me, her face glowing against a white wall adorned with abstract posters. Sis, I'm opening my first gallery soon. If you can't come, at least send some flowers. I managed a polite smile. Gallery funded from the house sale? She winked. Let's call it rotating capital. Brad helped a ton. I just wish you were more supportive. I turned the camera toward my laptop and hit record. Every conversation, every message they sent me, I saved them all in a separate password-protected folder. One of them included a message from Derek complaining, "You think I wanted to open a bar? I was pressured. Mom and Dad said if I didn't use the money, then I must not need it. How do you argue with that?" I didn't respond. I just took a screenshot. I reached out to a handwriting expert, someone who had worked with the FBI on forgery cases. When I booked the appointment, he asked me to bring every authenticated original signature I had. Bank documents, lease agreements, investment confirmations. After 2 days of analysis, he concluded, the signature on the power of attorney form is not yours. There's no match in stroke, pressure, or structure. I asked, so the person who forged it, were they experienced? He gave a faint smile. Whoever did this wasn't a professional. It's likely someone in your household. Someone who's seen your signature a few times and tried to mimic it. But poorly. I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or crushed. Someone in the house, did he mean my mother? My father? Or Melissa? One night I called Emma. I have enough, don't I? Legally? Yes. You have the grounds to file a lawsuit for document forgery, fraudulent property transactions, and breach of joint financial rights even if you're not on the ownership title. And if we can prove the notary's involvement, we could pursue criminal charges. I was quiet. But what do you want, Ari? Emma asked, her voice softening. I know you're not doing this just to get the house back. You're doing this for justice, aren't you? I nodded. In the dark, inside the quiet room, I whispered to no one but myself. They thought I was weak. That I wouldn't dare go against blood. They forgot I know how to track every dollar, every document, every word. I opened my laptop and created a new folder. I named it Enough. The first message I received came from an unknown number. The text was short, rushed. Is Derek with you? We need to find him urgently. I didn't reply. But a few hours later, an email popped into my inbox from a liquor distributor based in Burlington. The subject line read, regarding Mr. Derek Miller's outstanding debt. They had mistakenly identified me as Derek's financial representative because his bar's email had once listed me as the bookkeeping contact. I had helped him once with his investment cost sheet, and he used my name without asking. I opened the attached file. Nearly $17,000 in unpaid alcohol and bar supply invoices. After 3 months with no response from Derek, they had filed a civil lawsuit with the local court. I exhaled, not surprised. I had already heard whispers from acquaintances in Vermont that the bar lasted only one summer. At its grand opening, Derek had hired a live band, hosted a cocktail party for the whole town, and paid a photographer to snap shots of every cocktail. But not even 12 weeks later, a sign appeared on the front door, temporarily closed for renovations. Then it vanished quietly. Melissa was a different story. She didn't disappear. On the contrary, she was everywhere on social media. One post a day, each one laced with guilt-tripping, blame, and subtle jabs at me. The first post was a photo of a white wall with black marker scrawled across it. Family is the place that turns its back when you need them most. The caption read, turns out blood isn't always thicker than betrayal. The next was a video of Melissa in her studio, eyes red, voice trembling. I used to believe that as sisters we'd never abandon each other. I was wrong. When I was desperate, she, the one who could have helped with a snap of her fingers, turned away. I didn't need to see the name to know who she was. The vague wording was enough to imply, enough to provoke a flood of online hate from strangers who didn't know the full story. I started receiving messages from unknown people, cold-hearted, you're rich and you let your own sister end up on the street? One even said, if you were my kid, I'd disown you. I didn't respond. I didn't report. I just archived everything. And my parents, they didn't post, didn't blame, didn't accuse. They just called. The first call was from my mother. Ariana, I know what's done is done. But if you could, just this once, we're at risk of getting evicted from the apartment. Rent's gone up and your father can't work extra hours anymore. You know how tough things are these days. I listened without interrupting. At the end of the call, she choked up. We don't need much. Just 3 months' rent. So, I swear we won't ask for anything else. I didn't promise. I didn't refuse. I just said, let me think about it. 3 days later, my father called. Melissa, she won't say it, but your mom's under a lot of pressure. Every month we're short on rent. They're threatening eviction. The apartment's not great, but at least it's close to the hospital. If you could advance. I froze at the word advance. They still saw me as their bank. Dad, I said, voice low, whose name is on the lease? Your mom's. But Brad used to co-sign back when we moved in. He's pulled out now. I hung up. Not in anger. Not in pain. Just cold. That night, I opened my laptop and logged into the real estate platform my firm uses for property investments. I asked our legal team to look up the current owner of the building where my parents lived, and to reach out to the agent directly. What's the goal? The associate asked. I want to buy the apartment they're renting. Under a holding company. Keep the current rent unchanged. Make no announcement of ownership change to the tenants. Any specific reason? Just a long-term investment, I said, and signed the contract that same week. 3 weeks later, I received the email confirming ownership. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't collect rent. I didn't cut off the utilities. I simply kept the apartment in my name, quietly as a way to prevent them from ending up on the streets, even though they'd never done anything to deserve that kind of mercy. One afternoon, Emma stopped by with 2 coffees and a thoughtful, lingering look. "Are you planning to let them stay there forever?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "But at the very least, I want to know that if they ever lose everything, it won't be because I gave up on them." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she gently touched my hand. "You're too kind, Ari. But don't let that kindness be the thing that breaks you." I smiled and took a sip of the now cold coffee. "It won't kill me. Just hardens the heart a little." I never thought the day would come when I'd walk into a courtroom as the plaintiff, against my own family. That morning, the cold gray sky hung low over the municipal courthouse in Burlington. I sat behind a long wooden table wearing a dark suit, hair tied back, face bare of makeup. Not to look serious, but because I simply had no energy left for anything unnecessary. Emma sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on a thick file. Across the room, the defendant's bench was a scene I wouldn't forget. My father visibly thinner, my mother in a worn beige dress, her eyes no longer shimmering like they used to when she cried asking for money. Derek slouched forward, elbows on knees, unable to hide his anxiety. And Melissa, the one who once called me cold-blooded, wearing dark sunglasses, arms crossed, sulking like she was at an audition, not a hearing for financial fraud. The judge entered and struck the gavel sharply. "This hearing, case of MS. Ariana Grace Miller versus Mr. and Mrs. David and Elaine Miller and all associated parties is now in session." Emma stood and presented her opening statement. "Your Honor, my client is not only the victim of blatant signature forgery, but also someone who has quietly shouldered her family's financial burdens for over a decade without demanding contracts or conditions, because she believed in family. That trust was exploited to unlawfully transfer property she had every legal right to influence and protect." I didn't look away from the faces across the room. My father frowned. My mother looked down at the floor. Melissa pouted. The defendant's lawyer stood to respond. My clients, the Millers and their children, were granted financial control of the Vermont home by MS. Ariana years ago. Their actions were based on an implied agreement and familial goodwill. The transfer paperwork was properly notarized. She raised no objections for years, because she initially approved. Emma didn't interrupt. She calmly opened an audio file and played it through the laptop speakers. My mother's voice filled the courtroom, clear and breathy. "Don't worry. Ariana will never sue. He's too soft. She doesn't want to stir things up. This will all blow over as long as we stop mentioning it." A faint laugh followed, Melissa's. The judge looked up and turned to me. "Can you confirm this is your mother's voice?" I nodded, steady. "Yes. I recorded that on February 14th, during a call when she asked me to resume paying their utility bills." Emma then presented the handwriting expert's analysis. On the screen, each stroke and detail was compared, between my genuine signature and the forged one on the power of attorney. "They don't match," the expert said confidently when called to speak. "Based on stroke structure, slant, and pen pressure, these were signed by 2 entirely different individuals." The defense tried to redirect, mumbling about good intentions within a family. But the judge had already started writing. Then I was asked to speak. I stood, eyes fixed on the bench. "I'm not here for pity. I don't want credit. I just want it clearly stated. I never authorized the transfer of that house. I never signed a single document. I was deceived, not just by the act itself, but by the people I once believed would be there when I was at my weakest." I turned to look at my mother. I used to believe that if I gave enough, I'd earn their respect. I thought family meant no one would hurt each other. But the truth is, they did. And when I stood up for myself, they called me ungrateful. No one said a word. My mother lowered her head. My father stayed silent. Finally, after nearly 4 hours of proceedings, the judge delivered the ruling. The power of attorney presented was forged and holds no legal validity. The Vermont house may not be transferred without the formal consent of MS. Ariana Miller, a financial contributor with direct interest. Therefore, the court declares the transfer void. He paused, turning to the last page of the judgment. The defendants are ordered to return the property or its equivalent value as of today, and to pay financial and emotional damages totaling $325,000. The courtroom fell silent. This hearing is adjourned. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see their faces, because everything I needed had already been said by the court. And they were held accountable, not by emotions but by the law. I returned home later that evening. The rain had just stopped. Boston felt scrubbed clean after days of heavy gray. I hung up my coat, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the couch staring at my phone. Emma had already texted, "The official ruling is public. The media will pick it up soon." I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel triumphant. Just a long silence inside me, like a field emptied after a storm. Everything was now black and white. They had forged my signature. They had lied. They had smeared me for daring to say no. And now the truth was confirmed. I opened my laptop and logged into LinkedIn. I had written a lot on that platform: market insights and biotech career advice for young students, motivational pieces about women in leadership. But I had never shared anything this personal. Tonight was different. I opened the post editor, typed the first line, and paused. The screen glowed softly in the dark room, accompanied only by the sound of light rain falling outside. Then I wrote, each word deliberate, unflinching. My name is Ariana Grace Miller. I've spent nearly $400,000 over 12 years financially supporting my family, paying tuition, medical bills, utilities, home repairs, and maintaining an apartment they owned on paper but I carried on my back. Last year, they secretly sold the house I was still making payments on by forging my signature. When I refused to continue financing them, they called me selfish, ungrateful. And when I filed a lawsuit, they called me a traitor. The court ruled the power of attorney was forged, the contract void, and ordered full restitution. But no ruling can truly heal the wound of realizing your family saw you as a tool. Nothing more. I'm not sharing this out of bitterness, but to tell anyone who's gone through something similar: you are not alone. No one has the right to make you choose between your self-respect and so-called family duty. Family should never be the reason you're afraid to speak up. I sat silently, rereading every word. No regret. I hit post. Within 5 minutes, the shares hit triple digits. By the end of the night, the post had over 2,000 shares, nearly 15,000 reactions, and hundreds of comments. I read them all. A woman in San Diego wrote, "Thank you for your bravery. My mother emptied my retirement fund, and when I spoke up, she called me disloyal." A man in Texas wrote, "This story shook me. I co-signed a mortgage with my brother, and eventually got kicked out of the home I spent 6 years renovating." A younger person commented, Ariana, I'm only 24, but I've been paying off debts for my parents and 2 siblings. I always thought I was selfish for feeling tired. Now I know I'm not." Private messages poured in too. A journalist from Finance Boundaries reached out with an interview request. "We're running a special series titled, 'When Family Becomes the Exploiter.' Your story is powerful. We'd love to share it with a broader audience." I read that headline again and again, not out of curiosity but because it hit so hard. When family becomes the exploiter. That phrase, bitter yet accurate. And what chilled me more was realizing that thousands, maybe millions, of others were living under the same emotional erosion, but afraid to speak. I replied, "I'm willing. But only under one condition: the truth must stay intact. No sugarcoating, no spin, no calling this a minor family conflict. Because it's not. It's abuse." 2 days later, they sent a list of questions. The interview was conducted over Zoom with a female journalist named Nora. Sharp eyes, gentle voice. She didn't interrupt, didn't interject. When I told her about my mother's late-night calls, her voice softened. When I spoke about the house being sold without warning, she nodded slowly. And when I recalled the quote, "Ariana won't sue, she's too weak," Nora looked at me for a long moment and said, "But you did. And you're not weak. You're a reminder to all of us that sometimes, standing up for yourself is the most humane act of all." The interview was published a week later. A black and white profile shot of me, sharp, unapologetic. The headline read, "Just because they share your blood doesn't mean they can walk all over your trust." Views reached into the hundreds of thousands. And oddly enough, not a single family member responded. No angry texts. No guilt-tripping emails. As if Now that every mask had fallen, they no longer had the tools to pull me back into their old web of control. Their silence was their confession. I didn't need anyone's apology. But I needed the world to know that what happened to me wasn't rare. And if my story made even one person pause, reflect, and find the courage to draw their first boundary, that maybe all my years of sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. 1 year after the trial, I moved into a small penthouse in northern Chicago overlooking Lake Michigan. The wide glass balcony opened to the cool lake breeze, and every morning as I brewed coffee, the water reflected sunlight like a quiet blessing. No car horns, no urgent calls from familiar voices I no longer considered family. Just me, myself, and the kind of silence that used to feel like a luxury. I didn't buy the apartment for luxury, but because it was high enough, private enough, and far enough from the past. Every decision I'd made before revolved around the word responsibility. Paying debts, carrying burdens, making up for others. Now I was learning how to choose for myself. I didn't need anyone's permission to do so. My mother still called. Same number, same voicemail tone. Sometimes she'd leave soft messages. I just wanted to hear your voice, sweetheart. Other times longer. No matter what happened, I'm still your mother. You shouldn't hold on to anger like this. I just want us to heal. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. But I hadn't forgotten. I let the phone block every call from those familiar old numbers, not to punish them but to protect the parts of me that still hadn't fully healed. People say forgiveness is the path to freedom. But for me, boundaries are salvation. I don't need more apologies. I don't need more explanations. I just need them to stay behind me. That March, I was invited to speak at a university conference at Northwestern on financial privacy and personal legal protection. A part of me hesitated. I had never stood in front of a crowd talking about myself so directly. But another part felt stronger. If I had the courage to call out my own blood in court, I could stand tall before strangers. The talk was held on a Saturday morning. I wore a white button-down, hair tied back, no jewelry, no frills, just my eyes, direct and unwavering. I spoke about managing finances within families, the common pitfalls of shared assets, and most importantly, how to draw boundaries in writing, not just with hope. Afterward, a small group came to shake my hand and ask questions. Among them was a man with brown hair, an old but clean leather jacket, and a vintage Leica camera in his hand. You were very clear. Very grounded, he said as I packed up my laptop. I nodded politely. Thank you. I'm Nathan, he extended his hand. I was shooting photos for the event, but I also lost a home once because I trusted someone in my family. Not quite on your level, but enough to understand the feeling. I took his hand, felt the firm but kind squeeze. So, you had your own reason to be interested in this topic. He smiled. It's also how I heal. Through the lens. I document people who are reclaiming their power. Today you were one of them. We had coffee after the seminar. Then a week later, a walk through Lincoln Park taking a few candid photos. Nathan didn't ask about the trial, didn't mention the article. He didn't pry. When I tried bringing up the past, he simply shook his head gently. I don't want to know you through what others have written. I want to know you through what you choose to share. For the first time in ages, I felt ease. No pretending. No explaining. Just me, with my silences, my scars, and my attempts at starting again. One afternoon, Nathan and I stood on the balcony, the lake breeze running through my hair. He took a photo of me in the sunset. No editing, no staging. When I looked at it later, I was surprised. I wasn't smiling. But my eyes. They belonged to someone who had survived, who had been through it all and still stood tall. I no longer checked my mother's Facebook. I no longer saved my sister's number or Derek's email. The only physical tie between me and them now was a court document, sealed and filed away in my safe. I once had a family, yes I did. And I lost them. But in losing them, I found myself again. A version of me that wasn't built to serve, to carry the weight, or to earn acceptance. Just me, whole and free. And this time, I don't share my life with people who only know how to take. I choose peace. I choose boundaries. I choose love that comes from respect, not just shared blood. I choose freedom. And I have no regrets. What do you think about my story? Have you ever felt used, hurt, by the very people you once called family? Have you ever stayed silent for too long just because you were afraid of being called selfish, when in truth you were the one who gave the most? If this story stirs something inside you, I invite you to share your thoughts. Because somewhere out there, someone might need to hear a voice like theirs. A voice of understanding, of compassion, or simply the reminder that they're not the only one carrying too much in silence. Family life isn't always a safe haven. Sometimes, it's the place where we must learn to stand up, protect ourselves, and bravely draw the line, even if it means walking away. If you care about real, raw stories like this, about family, love, hurt, and the journey to healing, make sure to follow the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Because life isn't just what we see on the outside. It's also what we find the courage to face within.